Hi.
You're gonna... I'll do it. Welcome to Tin Maxx.
Hi.
I'm Tin.
Welcome.
This is the other guy.
That's me.
We're gonna talk about something I think is kind of interesting today. Max and I are both fans of Atlus games, mostly Persona, but especially me, the other ones too. And they're kind of weird about releasing and re-releasing their games.
Yeah.
Such as like Royal, for example. There was Persona 5 and then there was Royal, which is like an expanded version with quality of life improvements, new story details, new characters, new mechanics, stuff like that. And they've been doing it for a long time, at least since Persona 3. Next month, they are releasing Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, which is basically the Royal version of Vengeance. It's got a whole new story mode, tons of quality of life improvements that, as someone who played the game, I'm excited about. They look great. And most importantly for this one specifically is it's breaking from being just a Switch game to being on everything. PS5, maybe PC, don't quote me on that, Xbox, stuff like that. First of all, before we get into it, what do you think about Atlus's method of basically re-releasing a game with what is sort of DLC?
Yeah.
But as a whole new full-priced game.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, I kind of feel conflicted a little bit on it, in the sense of, I love playing Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal, and I love the quality improvements that you got in Persona 5 Royal. Why I'm conflicted on it, though, is the price. You are always spending essentially a whole nother $65, $70 for a game. And over again, that gets really frustrating when you think about it in the long term. You're paying about $140 sometimes if you're buying the game new. And then if you're buying the quality of life improvements in the DLC, instead of it being, a $15, $20 DLC that gets added on and then they update the game with the quality improvements, instead it's now a whole nother version of the game that you have to buy. And I don't know, that's what makes it so hard, where there's times where, obviously, I love revisiting the characters. I love going back to the stories that we love, right? Atlus does such a good job with that, and they do a great job expanding on it. The DLCs have always been really, really good, but my issue with it is just the fact that you're having to spend another $65, $70, and I just, that's a lot. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I haven't really had to do that. Like, what I mean is, with Persona 5, I bought it for like $20 on sale randomly one day and didn't play it for a year. So I never bought it full price initially. So because of that, I didn't really have a problem buying Royal full price because I already knew I liked Persona 5. I wanted, the new stuff, the quality of life stuff. And I was really excited about the game. So it kind of didn't really bother me that much. And with like Persona 3 and 4, the expanded editions had already been out. Golden is the one you could play on Steam, which is where I initially played it, and what was eventually ported to the PS4 and 5 and all that. So I've never really had to deal with that. This is kind of the first time where it's matters with SMT 5 because I bought the full game on the Switch, and once again, I kind of don't necessarily have a problem buying it full price again because it's on the PS5. And look, maybe this is small brained of me, but like I just, even like when I first played it on the Switch, I just kind of wished it was on the PlayStation. It seemed a little too big for what the Switch was capable of. And also like just in general, the Switch is a great console, but I've been a PlayStation player my whole life. So I would always rather play games on the PlayStation. So it coming to PlayStation is almost enough for me, but then there's also like the whole new basically side, like separate story that shoots off from the main one. There's tons of quality of life stuff. All of the DLC is included. There's some great DLC in that game. So yeah, again, not super conflicted, so I've never really had to deal with it, but I've seen a lot of old school Atlus fans I've seen a lot of resentment towards this and animosity towards it because it is kind of shady. And I think the best example I can think of is when Royal, which was originally a PS4 game, got a PS5 version, which I think just increased like the frame rate and the fidelity a little bit. Like, but it was once again another full price game.
Yeah.
It was, I didn't buy this. I don't have the PS5 version of Royal because it would have been another like $70 or whatever. And that one was stupid because especially at that time when games were getting a free PS5 upgrade. Resident Evil did it. Final Fantasy did it. So many games did it. Ghost of Tsushima. Some of them had like a $10 get the better version, whatever. But Atlus just didn't give you a choice at all. You had to buy a completely new version of the game. Mm-hmm. Your saves didn't carry over, if I remember correctly. Trophies, none of that stuff. It was like you were starting fresh. That also just kind of sucked.
Yeah.
But again, like I just didn't buy it, so I don't care.
What would you say to the argument that it should have already been that way? Like why not just wait another year before releasing it to have all those quality of life improvements, to have that new story on there? What would you say to, you know, the Atlus fans that wanted, you know, Persona 5 just to be Persona 5 Royal? You know, wanted these things just to already be packaged into the initial game. Because sometimes, at least I've seen, if people feel almost gypped because they got a game that they thought is going to be the game, and then now something new is coming out. You know, you're mentioning Shin Megami Tensei 5, where it's like, why did they not just wait and add that onto it so that it's just one complete game? I guess, what would you say to that?
I think I can't like I've got nothing to say against that because it's kind of true. Like, even I made jokes about Persona 3 Royal Extra Bullet or whatever, where like in a couple of years we were going to get another version of that. I don't think that'll be the case. They're saying it's not the case, and we'll get into that in a second, but it seems like they're changing how they're expanding that game specifically. So I can't disagree necessarily, but I also don't think I don't think when Persona 5 was in development, when it was being released, the ideas of Royal were like existed. Like, they weren't, it's not like those annoying day one DLCs where it's like, this content's ready to go, it's there.
I hate day one DLCs. Buy
the $130 edition to get this, you stupid idiot. It's not that, I don't think. Like,
stupid.
There's years between releases. If I remember correctly, Shin Megami Tensei 5 initially released in 2020, which is, it was like late 2020, I think. So it was like roughly 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And the time spent like this whole new story, the quality of life improvements, a lot of that is, you know, a direct reaction to criticism fans had. Like Royal, one of my favorite quality of life updates is the fact that bullets reload or reset after each fight instead of each time you enter the palace, because that was terrible. I almost never used a gun for that exact reason. And it was like, that's something that very clearly says to me, like, oh, they heard that people didn't like that, so they fixed it.
Sure.
So I get it, and I get why people are like, I'm just gonna wait a couple years until the super duper edition comes out. That, yeah, I get it, but I also don't think it's a case of, well, we had all this ready to go, we'll slap it in a new version. It's just kind of how they did it, and it kind of made more sense back in like the pre-DLC days, like with FES, which is what I think is the first example of this. Could be wrong. Where it's like, DLC is not a thing. You have like expansion packs in the, like, I remember Rock Band had like expansion packs that were like 20 songs or whatever.
Woo, let's go. Yeah. And there would be one song you like out of the 20.
Yeah. The metal track expansion pack.
That's right.
And like so like it made a little bit more sense then. I do think it's always valid to kind of question the price. Vengeance doesn't really bother me too much because the base game is $60, which is what I think the original one was too, and it's all of that and more. And like I said, it's on consoles it wasn't originally available on. That's pretty cool. I think that is kind of a very differentiating factor for Vengeance. And I also, we'll get into it in a second, but I think there's a chance Atlus might be changing how they approach these stuff in the future. Royal kind of, not Royal, too many R words. Reload kind of seems to be like suggesting that DLC will be the future. Kind of annoying DLC, which again we'll get into. But what I specifically want to mention, and I want to get your opinions on this. This is his first time learning this, I think. For the first time, Atlus with the re-release of a game is delisting the original version. When Vengeance releases, you will no longer be able to buy vanilla Shin Megami Tensei 5 on the Switch. If you already own it, like I do, you can still download it, but you cannot buy that version of the game ever again.
Wow.
What do you think?
I think that's
weird,
a mistake.
right?
I think that's a mistake. I don't. I think, you know, as we're talking about price and all that type of stuff, that goes into it, right? Where you should be able to get the classic version for a cheaper price once the new version comes out, right? So they're basically taking away that choice for players, like, you know, and honestly, I think that's a mistake in the sense of, like, you know, today we went to a gaming place and there's Persona 1, Persona 2, and we're looking at these games and like, these are so cool. The original classic games on disc. That is, you know, you can buy, and of course they're ridiculously expensive because they're classics, right?
Yeah.
And so taking away the original game to make it where you can only get the new ones, I think is actually a really big mistake. I think they're not realizing how the Atlus community can be very much more a collector kind of community, you know. And so
I think gaming in general has an issue with preservation of older titles. I made this point in the problem with remakes video we did a while ago, where remakes are fine. I don't have a problem with remakes, but the problem with remakes, it's a terribly worded sentence. The problem with the remakes is less so the remake existing and more so the fact that it sometimes replaces the original in accessibility and who can play it more. You can easily play Resident Evil 2 remake. Like, you could go buy it for $5 probably at like a used game store. But Resident Evil 2 is, the original one is more expensive. It's on a console most people don't have anymore. You'd have to buy that. It's much harder to play original Resident Evil 2 than the remake. And you can make steps to like stand against that. Like, just port a classic collection. Capcom should just make like Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, slap them all in like a $20 package, and it would sell amazing. And then there's a version of those games that people can play on modern hardware.
Because honestly, this generation and is very nostalgic, right? Like you all these movies that are coming out are a lot of sequels to things that we've already had in the past. You know, a lot of games are coming out that they're remaking and doing. So it points back to how the original games, the classic games, are important. I mean, I think of like, you know, Zelda Ocarina of Time. You want to play that on the N64 because that is more original and it's fun. We grew up doing that, right? You grew up playing the original Pokemon games on the Game Boy. And so it's like you want to play Pokemon Red just because you remember Pokemon Yellow. You know, like those are the things that I think the gaming company is actually missing a little bit, especially Atlus, if they're changing that, because you're not going to have that nostalgia anymore. If you're not able to go back and play the original, you know, 10 years from now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, you know, Shin Megami Tensei 5 is newer. It's not a big deal. 10 years from now, people are going to want to play the classic vanilla version, guaranteed, even though there's a nicer, newer remake out. So I think that's a mistake that Atlus is doing that for sure.
Yeah, it just, and I've heard the argument be made that it's so people don't buy it by mistake. And I just gotta say, don't be stupid. Pay attention to what you're buying.
Right. The new game should be, you know, $65. The old game should be like $20.
Here's the trick for that. Look at the title. If it says SMT 5, that's the original. If it says SMT 5 Vengeance, that's the new one. It's that simple.
Wow. Like, that's honestly a pretty crazy concept to think about.
That's not a good argument. That's not a good argument. I don't think.
No.
I can almost kind of understand the argument that like Vengeance makes SMT 5 original kind of not redundant, I guess, but like kind of irrelevant. That's obsolete. Like from a obsolete, yeah, I guess would be a good word, because it, like Royal, it has almost all of the original content. Like if you just don't interact with Kasumi and psychiatrist guy, whatever his name is, then you get the original ending. You don't get the extra semester. It's the same ending. And there is changes that are, you can't, like the boss fights and the palaces are designed different. Those you're stuck with the Royal versions. But Vengeance is a very similar thing where it's, you can play the base game, the original story, you can kind of ignore some of the quality of life stuff, although like quality of life stuff is never really a problem.
Yeah.
When it makes the experience better.
Right.
And I could almost get that argument.
Nostalgia.
But it still doesn't justify taking away the choice and taking away the option to buy and play the original.
Yep.
Like, I mean, obviously the physical cartridges will still exist out there.
Have to.
But it's just a very, like, what if they had done that with Persona 5?
Right. Where it's like you might want to play the original Persona 5 game. And I think a really good example of like nostalgia and going back to playing a game is like a game like Arkham Knight, for example, where it's like I remember us sitting down on the couch overnight playing that. I came to your house from work, played, went back to work, right? So like we just played through that game, and there's something about the original game on that console that will forever have a place on my heart. Like it won't be something that if they do a remake and say you can never play that would hurt. Like that would feel, not great. And so it's just like, I think taking away the original games, it might not sound crazy right now. You might be thinking to yourself, it's not going to be a big deal because it's just, the game becomes obsolete. Yeah. But for people that played the game opening day or, literally are so excited about it and have stories behind it, I mean, that's not going to be as great, as others. So
like it also it could potentially set a dangerous precedent going forward. What if Naughty Dog with The Last of Us Part 1, the remake of The Last of Us, which was dumb and shouldn't exist.
Should not watch that video.
What if that was like released and then The Last of Us remastered was taken away? Like it just becomes a very like sensitive, weird gray area where maybe we just shouldn't do that.
Yeah, agreed. Why take away content? Taking away content just doesn't make sense. Yeah. I mean, let people choose. And again, if they want to get the base game then for cheaper because the new version comes out, I think that should be an option. It shouldn't be something that, okay, now to play this game, you have to no matter what pay the full price, right? I don't think it should be that no matter what, to play the game, you have to pay the full price. I think it needs to be something that you can have a cheaper option because it's been out for 4 years. Like that just is, it's unfair to someone who maybe has been like, you know what, I'm saving money. I'm going to wait till it goes on sale. And then now all of a sudden the new version comes out. Well, now you can't even get the old version. Yeah. Like that's,
I owned it physically originally. And then I sold the physical one years ago to buy something else because I have a problem. And then like this year, I think I actually bought the digital edition for like $20. Like it was, and like that game I really liked SMT 5. I didn't get to talk about it when it came out because I wasn't really doing those kinds of videos at that point, but I really like SMT 5. It's fun. I'm definitely doing a video on Vengeance. All this regardless. I just think it's something worth talking about and something that needs to be talked about because this is the kind of stuff that affects all of us in a way. Like if everyone starts adopting this kind of practice, it can be a very slippery slope.
Yeah.
Obviously, all of these corporations are fueled by greed.
Yeah.
Obviously. Look at Ubisoft. God, I hate Ubisoft. I don't want to pay $130 for a game. I won't.
But it's the deluxe amazing great edition.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but who asked for Avatar Frontiers of Pandora in the first place, let alone $130 version of it? Who asked for that? Star Wars? Sure, people love Star Wars, but even that's stupid. The new Assassin's Creed game already has a $130 edition. And look, Atlus isn't necessarily better. Reload had a $100 version. I bought it. I'm stupid. I'm part of the problem. I know that. But like, to me, it was worth it because of like, I'm not going to get into it. So like, and the day one DLC is also just annoying. I did buy it. I am part of the problem. But the DLC for day one that was released with Reload should have just been in the game.
Agreed.
Day one DLC shouldn't be a thing because all that is to me is something you took out of the game and slapped a paywall on. Yep. That's all it is to me.
Yep. No, 100%. Because there are games out there nowadays that you can play for tons and tons of hours, right? And Persona obviously is like that. Shin Megami Tensei 5 is like that, where you can play for hours and hours. It's a long game. So taking out like a portion of the game that honestly you're still gonna you have all this game. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And it's obviously greedy, right?
Yeah.
And so, day one DLCs should just not be a thing. That should be a part of the game, 100%.
With Persona specifically, like, how great would it be to just be like fusing personas, and then all of a sudden you discover that you can fuse like Ryuji's persona?
Yeah.
Like, how cool would that be? Like, you don't necessarily know that that's a thing, but you're just mix and match, and then bam, Captain Kid.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
It'd be so cool.
And like, you can unlock the music tracks, because like, you spend a lot of time in Tartarus in that game. So I kind of love the ability to add. I love having the ability to listen to the older games soundtracks. It helps mix up the time spent in there, and they're all really good songs.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with that, but like, let us unlock it. Let us like,
Yeah.
There's literally a CD store in the mall in Royal that doesn't do Reload. I mean, that doesn't do anything. Imagine being able to go there, spend money, and unlock Last Surprise as a song that will play sometimes when you bet. Like, that's the kind of stuff that DLC really hurts and hinders, is that kind of really cool unlockables. And that sucks. And again, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. I just feel like game developers overall, really need to start rewarding their longtime players, like rewarding the people that actually keep coming back to the series, keep coming back to the games. And, obviously they're companies, they're businesses, they're trying to make as much money as possible. But if you reward your fan bases, that goes a long way. And if just one developer would do that, all the other ones would have to follow suit.
Hey, they're not all arbitrary. They're not all bad.
No.
God of War Ragnarok, Santa Monica just gave us a great DLC for free. That was, in a lot of ways, a love letter to fans. It was great. Big fan of that. It's not everyone,
right?
Obviously, but like the ones that are doing it, Atlus. I don't even know if it's Atlus or Sega at this point. But someone in that company is pushing to make as much money off of each game as possible.
Yeah.
Another recent example of this is the expansion pass for Reload, which is also interesting for another reason I'll get to in a sec. But it's the answer, right? The epilogue to the main game. It's a very important part of that story. The original is a little mixed on response, because it has you can't use the compendium in the original The Answer.
Okay.
You have to fuse, like, you have to go get the persona to fuse it. You can't summon them. It's a horrible idea.
Awful.
God awful idea. Hopefully they fix that, because that sucks. Anyway, so the expansion pass, I think, is like $30. Oh, I was wrong. It's $35. It's $35. Okay, and here's the contents. You watching this probably already know this. He doesn't know this. It's The Answer. A costume pack where you can make the characters look like they're dressed them like they're in the Velvet Room.
Nice.
Some songs from Persona 4 and 5.
Okay, that's a lot. Really?
That's it. Yeah. It's like it's a battleground music pack or whatever. The costume and like an additional song that's like a remix of the Velvet Room theme, I think. And then The Answer. The Answer is probably $25 of what the expansion pass is offering. You can't buy it separately. The only way to buy The Answer is to buy the expansion pack to get those extra little things that are dumb and nobody wants them.
And that is an example of some game developing greed there, where that's ridiculous.
That is a choice being made that screws over fans.
Yep.
I don't necessarily want those costumes or those songs. Maybe the songs, but the option should be there to buy it individually.
Yep.
Even day one DLC. Hate it. Shouldn't exist. But with Reload, you could individually buy any of the DLCs you want. Instead of buying the deluxe edition, you could buy like, I just want the songs, or I just want the extra personas or whatever. You don't have to like spend $30 to get all of them if you only want one. The expansion pack is not doing that. And it's, I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's not the biggest deal because it's probably like $10, but it's an annoying precedent. It's frustrating, especially as fans of these games that have like Metaphor. I'm very excited for Metaphor, but like the most recent trailers show us that there is a digital deluxe edition with day one DLC featuring songs and costumes. Like it's it's an Atlus game. At this point, you can't not expect that, which is a problem. I think.
Yeah.
Even Vengeance has a $10. It's less egregious than some of the other Atlus games, but it has a $10 digital deluxe version with some additional DLC. Or a game that already had a $100 edition when it was first released. It's just kind of getting ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, and I can understand to a certain point of like, you know, they need to make money. Again, they're a business. I get that. But there is a point where you can just tell that it's more exploiting their fans versus actually, again, doing something to be like, hey, we worked hard on this. We created this and we want to give this to you. We're going to charge X amount because we worked on this and we did this. It's instead now just like, well, we know for the fact that these fans are going to want this, so we're just going to charge $35. And hey, guess what? You know, we're just going to make it that, and you have to pay that. Like that's
I'm
so hard.
Gonna get the expansion pass because I want to play the answer. I also want to talk about it here on the channel, and I guess I'm getting the other. And also, why is it in waves? It's in waves. The first wave was like some songs, and then the second wave is the costumes, and then the third wave is the answer. Yeah. One of those is not like the others. 100%. It's weird. 100%. That's another thing I wanted to bring up. Do you think Reload's approach to adding content will be the staple for Atlus going forward? Like with Metaphor and Persona 6, whenever that comes out, are we going to get a Persona 6 re-release in a few years? Or are we going to get a Persona 6 DLC?
It's a really good question. I honestly think it could go either way. Like, I don't think it's something where it's like, for sure it's going to be DLC, for sure it's going to be a re-release. My guess is based off of what Persona or just Atlus has done in the past, is I bet they're going to do a re-release. I bet it's going to be something where it comes out, you buy the full game, you play it, there's complaints, about certain things here and there. Then there's a Persona 6 version that has a DLC with a quality of life improvements, and then it's a re-release and they charge you another $70 for it. So, but I think that's my issue. Again, if you're a new Atlus fan and you're getting the brand new version, you're not worried about it. But if you just paid $70 for Persona 6, for example, and then the Persona 6, new edition comes out 2 years later, that is another $70. Oh, but wait, there's an expansion pass that you can also add to that. Yeah. That's another $35. You're literally talking about paying $175 for essentially one game. Yes, you'll be able to do it like 2 playthroughs, maybe 3 playthroughs, right? Of like where it's new and different. But you would probably buy a game that costs $70 by Atlus that is totally different than paying another $70 just so that you get an extra 25 minutes, 30 minutes of content. Like that just is frustrating. I guess maybe a little bit more, but still, it's fair, frustrating.
Like the additional part of Royal is like another 30 to 50 hours, depending on how long it takes.
That's fair.
It's not a little edition, and maybe that's another reason it can't be DLC necessarily, but I don't know. I think Reload, how they're approaching the expansion to that, it could very well be a one-time thing because of the nature of Reload being a remake, the answer being the only thing they're adding to it. And from my understanding, they weren't even like for sure doing the answer. Like the answer wasn't being worked on until the game released and was a massive success. So that's DLC. Supplementary, all right? I will always say this when it comes to DLC. It should be supplementary. It should not be required.
Yep. 100%.
It should be like you get the full experience without buying DLC. DLC's extra. It's a fun little. I've been playing The Force Unleashed recently. That has some great DLC because it's a what if scenario where a Starkiller goes and he murders everyone from Star Wars. Cool. It's obviously not canon. It's not even canon to the game, but it's a fun expansion to play. The answer, the way they're treating it, also kind of fits that. I think it's maybe a little bit more of a gray area because it is an epilogue to the main story, and no spoilers, but it answers a lot of stuff from the main story. But I don't think it's mandatory. I didn't play the answer for years after I first played Persona 3, and it didn't affect my enjoyment of the game or its story. It just adds to it if you so choose. Supplementary.
But are you scared at all that they might do both? right? So, for example,
I am now.
Yeah, like you have an expansion, you know, and then you also have a re-release. So the re-release comes first, then they add another expansion, especially with the popularity of Persona 5 and what that brought.
Yeah.
I mean, Atlus is at a point where they can obviously monetize so much more, and it's sad because most fans are buying. I mean, you're just saying like you're gonna buy it, like you're going to, and that's I think that's the issue, is that they aren't caring enough about fans. It doesn't feel like at this stage, especially with some of the stuff that I've learned today. So
yeah,
yeah.
First for him, I follow all this. I know everything that's going on.
Yeah, I don't have enough time in my hands to do that.
Let us know what you think of all this in the comments.
Yeah.
I think at the very least it's a worthy discussion because, like I said, it affects gaming. It affects the future of Atlus games, gaming in general, and because of that, it's something that needs to be discussed and brought up. And when like one of the companies is doing wrong, we should be like, hey, stop.
Right.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I think being open to talk about stuff is very important, right? And so, you know, let us know your thoughts. You know, you might disagree with us, and that's okay. Let us know in the comments of why. And make sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.